So as a board gamer or board game collector, at some point or another, you might buy too many games, and for one reason or another, you have to go through the process of seeing which games you keep and which games you cull. And that is what we're doing in today's list video, as I am counting down the top 5 games I regret selling, and why I bought them back a second time, and then where they are today after buying them a second time. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Boardgaymergirl channel. If you're new here, my name is Natalie and I like to talk about all things board games, but from a primarily solo perspective. And today I am taking another list video, but from a particular perspective of thinking of the top 5 games I had in my collection. For one reason or another, I got rid of. I regretted and made that right by getting the game again and seeing if I liked it or if there was a reason to keep it or cull it again. And the first game that I'm going to go over today is probably the biggest, chunkiest game that, like, the physical box is big of the games that I'll go over today. And maybe it's a heartbreaker for some to know that this happened at some point, but the first game that I'm going to mention is A Feast for Odin by Uwe Rosenberg. And this is like a big chunker of a game and probably one of the more favorite Uwe Rosenbergs that I know of people who like that designer. And it had a whopping 61 different worker placement spots, but you're also doing a polyomino kind of board. So it was like a mix of different mechanisms. And at the time, I hadn't really experienced a lot of polyomino tile laying games that were chunkier. What I primarily got into board games for was an activity that wasn't dependent on screens, internet, computer, weather dependent, or for having other people at the table. I deep dove into the hobby when I was in nursing school because I needed a study break that wasn't a part of screens or books. I mean, yes, there are rule books and board games, but those ones were a different kind of reading, right? Anyways, I had finished nursing school and I found A Feast for Odin. I don't know what got me into the game to try. I think I had tried Patchwork, but I know the solo community was really into this game. So I bought it and I punched it and I set it up on my table and I said, okay, I'll play it tomorrow after I do some studying. So I studied a little bit and then I went to bed. And I couldn't sleep. I was just too excited to play the game. So I remember the sun was coming up and I was at my board game table actually playing the game. And the solo mode for the Feast for Odin game, it's similar in a lot of the Uwe Rosenbergs that I've played, where it's beat your own score, but you just take 2 different color components and you alternate turns with those player markers. So you'll basically be putting out a couple of workers each round and keeping those workers on those spots so that you block yourself from taking it with the opposite colored workers on your next turn. And you'll have a certain amount of rounds to kind of optimize getting the most points by making different tiles, having bonus cards, getting more boards to put more tiles on, and you're balancing getting tiles and getting points and money and income for those tiles, but also trying to mitigate the negative points that every board has if you don't fully complete filling out the board. So it's really interesting, but it is beat your own score. I liked the game so much that I think at the time I got a folded space insert for it because it's a big game and having an organizer is almost like the side hobby of this hobby. And then I also got the Norwegians expansion, which I only realized later. My friend Olivia was talking about A Feast for Odin and I realized that I'd never played the game with my expansion when I did have it. But at a certain point, my love of the game and how big it was still didn't help it get to the table as often as I would have liked. And at that time, I was trying to keep my collection down to 1 Kallax shelf. So I think I have it over there. So a 4x4 Kallax shelf was what I was trying to keep my collection within, because how could you need more games than that? As I sit in front of many shelves. But yes, at the time I did cull it, and I think I instantly regretted it. The more I heard other solo gamers talking about it, or friends that I have having it as one of their top games ever, solo or multiplayer, it was a pain point. And it took me a really long time to actually find the game to get it again, as it was not at flags, the reprints weren't coming out, or if the reprints happened, they sold out so quickly. So I really only just got it in 2025 again, and I'm happy to say that I still have it. I do not have an organizer for the game, and I don't have the expansion. I know the expansion, I think I've played it on BGA, as BGA has that adaptation on it, and I really like it there. But I will say that playing the game on BGA just isn't as enjoyable as playing the physical game of it. Putting it out and like building it out on the table for you to play solo, I would call it maybe like medium effort, because there's definitely now bigger, chunkier games where I have to relearn it completely in order to play it solo. So there is like one night you put it out on the table and then the next day you actually get to play it. And I'd say that's probably for a bunch of these types of games in the background. But this one, now that I've become more experienced with board games, this one isn't as bad to set up as I used to think. And it is still like a bit of a table hog. And coming back to figuring out those worker placement spots and what they mean takes a second as well, but I'm not getting rid of this. I can't get rid of it again. So it is staying in the collection, but it was definitely a hard point where I think it was 2018 I first got the game. I think I called it around 2019, and I only got it last year. So that was a long time to be without a little feast for Odin, but now I have you, and you shall never leave me. And that is the first game on the list. The second game I'm going to have on the list is one of probably, if you knew me before YouTube and followed me on Instagram from a long time ago, I was very into card games. So living card games was a big deal to me. They kind of gave me the biggest jump into board games in general, as living card games are similar to trading card games in the sense that they play like deck construction games. But in a living card game, you're taking on something cooperatively. So for this game, it had just come out, I believe, and this game was Marvel Champions. And Marvel Champions is one of the three games of what I like to call the Holy Trinity, which is Marvel Champions, Lord of the Rings, the card game, and Arkham Horror, the card game. And Marvel Champions, I think I heard of after Arkham Horror, the card game. And Marvel Champions at the time just had a better theme for me. So I was really curious about it. That the way that the game would play was that they'd release different hero packs. So the idea is that your hero pack would have a starting deck already included, and you could literally just open the hero deck box and play it against any villain that you already have. So the Marvel Champions core box came with 5 different starter decks and I think 3 different villains that you could fight against. And there's Rhino, which ended up being my regular way that I'd break in every starter deck that I collected at the time. And then 2 other ones where I can't remember who the villains are at this point. I played through every starter deck, then I learned how you were able to construct decks, which in this one was a little easier, I think, for me, where it was kind of like you take just one aspect and there are 5 different aspects that you can use, and then you'd take a particular hero deck and take their special cards and mix them together and then take on a villain of your choosing. So that was the starter set, and I played that a lot. I remember getting it in 2019, and at that time I was working as a nurse in the hospital. So I took the rule book to work one night because I was on night shifts and I didn't usually sleep on night shifts, but I would always take my board game rule books for my break, and that's what I'd be doing. And I was just so excited to read that rule book when I was there on break and then come home and play the game. And then I think found Marvel CBD, where folks could construct construct decks and share them with people. So I'd go through that in order to like get help with deck construction and how to build different decks. I would go on and buy like every release copy that was coming out. So new hero decks would come out, new villain decks would come out, and then they'd come out with campaign boxes. So in the rule book, you'd read your little rules in the front of the book, and then you'd continue to go through a like 5 chapter scenario book where you take on 5 different villains, and depending on what happened during those situations, your hero that you'd play as throughout the campaign would then unlock certain things, or depending on the campaign, there'd be certain mechanisms that were special for that campaign. And it was really neat. It was really interesting. It kind of followed similar paths that their Arkham Horror, the card game, did. But Marvel Champions was important at that time because I also learned that you could watch the Avengers movies in a chronological timeline. Instead of the way that they were released, you could watch them in the order of a timeline that they were all a part of. So I kind of like did that as part of my excitement for the Marvel Champions core box being announced and released. But as time went on, I got the Hulk deck, I think was the hero deck, that at that point I started to be like, uh-oh. Living card games they become a side hobby of getting organization and tokens and extra bits for the card game. Then you're also playing that game constantly. And trust me, I really liked playing it, but I started to feel bad for my board games that I wasn't getting to the table as much, and trying to juggle both of those while thinking of how much money I'm spending on living card games. I think I got the game in 2019, and by 2020 or something, very early on in the beginning of the Marvel Champions game, did I just decide I don't think I want to keep this right now. So I sold everything that I had. At that time, I was only printing dividers that fans made on the Board Game Geek website, and would print them at a print shop nearby that they'd have them on cardstock, and then I'd cut all the dividers out. And I also started to get, because I put everything in the core game box when I was organizing it at the time. And by the time I got to the Hulk hero, I kind of was filling up the box with what I had. So I ended up selling everything that I had, and I later regretted it because living card games were such a big thing for me. It was more of battling, am I going to fully go down this rabbit hole or not? And when I sold it, I realized I regretted it, and I bought it back a second time. And geez, did I come back with a vengeance when I bought it the second time, because I eventually got everything back from the back end of the catalog, and then continued to go through getting every single thing that would come out. So I think I have everything from the back catalog up to a certain point. I think I stopped buying regularly maybe early last year or the end of 2024. I have 4 full boxes, all sleeved hero cards. I don't do it for the villain cards because it's expensive, and I use Dragon Shield sleeves for my living card games. And then I got fancy Tesseract dividers, which is from the UK, inexpensive. And then I bought a whole bunch of buy the same tokens for the game. And buy the same token actually gave me the boards, the hero and villain boards and scene boards as a collection when I went and bought another time. So that was really nice. And I actually have this right now. It did not leave my collection a second time, and it's actually living on my living card game table that's typically in some of my other videos, my monthly recaps. In the background, there's a IKEA table that's got like a folding flap that I use for doing all of my living card games, or any kind of card games where I play against an opponent and I just do my own deck in front of it. So Marvel Champions, I got back with a vengeance. I still really like it. It's one of the easier of the living card games to play. And yes, I like it. Now on to some other ones. So the third game that I'm going to talk about, I don't know what it is, but it's another Uwe Rosenberg game. And it makes it sound like I don't like his games. It's weird because I like them, and clearly it's on this list. But the game is Nusfjord, and this is a very popular solo game. And it's similar to A Feast for Odin, but it's a smaller game. It's not going to take up an entire table. You could probably set up and play it within 30 minutes if you're playing solo. And you're basically also trying to build up your board. You're in a fishing village or something, and you're kind of trying to industrialize and tourists and stuff like that. But you'll have different decks of cards, which will have different worker place spots. So depending on the deck and then shuffling it out, you're not using every card from a deck in one play. So you might not ever get the exact same cards or worker placement spots together. And then you'll have another side of the board where there's different workers placement spots, and you can only have so many workers placed on those spots for your player count. And in solo, you're using it kind of the same way that A Feast for Odin does solo. So it's still beat your own score, and you're using two different sets of colored workers to alternate turns so that some spaces are blocked by your own self, and you can't just take the same action twice. I think it's played over 7 rounds, and you're just trying to get the best score that you possibly can. This game, I think at first, I enjoyed it, but at the time, I think it was 2021 that I picked this one up. So I had regretted A Feast for Odin. I was in my saddies maybe and picked this up as a replacement Uwe game while I waited for A Feast for Odin to come back into stock. But I got the game, and a lot of solo people were really into it, and I played it, and for some reason I was like, I like it, but I am maxing out on my ceiling of always getting 30 to 40 points for beat my own score. 45, I think, was my highest one with the decks in the base game. And I think I got the salmon deck or the place deck as an expansion so that I could get those little gold coins, the little gold metal coins while I played the game. And I liked it, but it just felt like I was hitting a ceiling every time, that at the time it wasn't satisfying to me and who I was as a gamer back then. So I did call the game, and last year a friend brought it to a board game day, and I played it for the first time multiplayer. And I really enjoyed it, and I really liked it. And from that point on, I was looking to get another copy. I was able to get the big box version, which has all 7 expansions in it. One of the expansions was a new one, which adds little pink meeple to the game. So the expansion is another little deck, but some of the mechanisms include getting these little pink workers. But I had just become a different gamer, I think, and I appreciated things differently. And for me, Nusfjord kind of was a journey of how I just changed as a gamer. I think in the beginning, maybe my solo gaming experience or just gaming in general was more about getting to a certain score or preferring to have an AI or bot where it was competitive and I always had to chase something. So for me in Nusfjord, it was what's the point? Because my end game is always coming to the same conclusion, and it's around the same score, and I'm just whatever. By the time I played this game multiplayer, and then eventually did buy the game again, I realized that for me, for this game, and maybe in general in board gaming, I understood and appreciated the journey and the experience and the calm nature of just going through a game, and the end game is not really the point. I wouldn't call myself a competitive gamer where I need to win. I think a lot of people wouldn't maybe categorize me in that. I'm there to have a good time, and I'm just happy to be board gaming in general. But when I solo board game, I tend to prefer having an actual opponent when I'm playing a solo game, just so that there's that edge between something. versus beat your own score, which feels like a secondary mode that I look for in games. Even though it's pretty much just playing yourself by yourself. And I guess over the years, I've now found more joy in just experiencing and enjoying the design that board game designers come up with. It's just so smooth and fluid, and it takes like 20, 30 minutes, and it feels like a calm, like afternoon experience with a cup of tea kind of thing. And I really liked it. And for this one, yes, I do still have the board game with me, and it will not be leaving my collection. I enjoy it a lot. I think I want to play this week, so maybe if you're in the comments, and I think there's 7 different decks, and I'm wondering what way I should try to figure out what deck I should play. So if you have a suggestion onto which of the Nusfjord decks that I should play for my next solo playthrough, put it in the comments below. I believe there is the herring, the mackerel, and the cod deck. Then there was an expansion for the salmon deck and the place deck. And then that's 5, what was there? I think there's trout. And then the one that is in this one is the be a spoken one, the little pink meeples one. So whichever deck you would prefer me to play, let me know in the comments below. Maybe I'll also do a little vote on my other social media channels. Even though polls only let you have 4 options, maybe I'll randomly roll for it and do a vote on those ones, just so that everyone can participate. But you're all special. Anyways, on to the next one. I've already talked about living card games, and I'm now realizing at just this moment that I'm doing a top 5, and I've had 2 Uwe Rosenbergs, and now I'm going to have 2 living card games that I bought once and for one reason or another called and regretted it. And this one is Arkham Horror, the living card game. Now, this one is different from the list because I think I actually bought it 3 times. So, I mean, there's a love-hate relationship in there, but I bought it the first time, and I think I wasn't even on social media specifically for Boardgaymergirl stuff. I just maybe had my personal Instagram at the time, the first time I bought it, and I wasn't as heavily into it. Arkham Horror, the card game, came up because, one, I remember a lot of people liking Arkham Horror, the board game, but at the time, I think Eldritch Horror had just come out, or maybe was newer than the other Arkham Horror board games that were out there. So I ended up getting Eldritch Horror, and it's because I was looking for games with a strong narrative. So I think Robinson Crusoe was a big one at that time, and then Eldritch Horror for me, and just great big chunky games. Seventh Continent was one that just had, like, I wanted to read more of a book and a choose your own adventure kind of board game, which seemed like a newer kind of mechanism at the time. So Eldritch Horror, you have like this huge map, and you have different investigators that makes it kind of also seem like a role-playing board game. Each of your characters have like strength, stealth. I can't remember what the character things are, but you have a certain range of skill sets, and you'd have to go through skill checks every time you kind of do something or want to do something. And you'll pick up different cards that have different story points, and depending on what your roles are, will have different bad or good things happen. You'll have monsters pop up, and you have this ultimate kind of story arc where you end up with some big bad, so like Cthulhu or whatever it was. But for Eldritch, the board game, the map and all the setup just took so long, and it's such a table hog. So I found Arkham Horror, the card game, and it was my first living card game that I found at the time. And it sounded like it was going to be Eldritch Horror, the board game, but as cards with more flexibility and just more content that's being supported over time. So not that Eldritch Horror, the board game, didn't have content coming out over whatever span of time. Fantasy Flight is kind of famous for having expansions on expansions on expansions for all of their Arkham line, and obviously Marvel Champions and Lord of the Rings games. Arkham Horror was just something completely new to me. And you'd have your investigator that's similar to the Eldritch Horror experience, except you'd be going through different campaigns. And the core box came with, I think, 3 different scenarios or stories, and I think 5 different investigators again with different starter decks that you can use. So I constructed a deck, I'd go through different scenarios. And when you're building your deck, especially for a campaign, you have to start your deck with all 0 experience cards. And as you go through a campaign and you earn experience by exploring different areas of the scenario or fighting different monsters, you would get those experience points to get upgradable cards for different things. So let's say I have a hammer that is 0 experience, but 0 experience cost to put in my deck, but I get 2 experience. I can pay those 2 experience to get like Hyper Hammer or something and trade those cards in my deck. So now I have a way better card in as I go further through the story. And while you're playing in campaign mode, you will also be tracking how your investigator experiences each scenario. So a campaign might be 6 different scenarios, but your investigators could die in the 4th scenario, and that campaign is now done for you. And then you have different endings that can apply depending on what you do or don't do in each scenario. The setup just takes a really long time as well, in the sense that you'll typically have 2 cards. One's kind of like telling you how you have to work through the scenario. Another one, they give you story bits. And then you're placing things on the table as if you're going through different rooms or locations similar to Eldritch Horror. And you'll have different arrows, tokens that you can use to go through different rooms. There'll be different monsters on the board. So again, similar to Eldritch Horror, a smaller table presence. I feel like more flexibility even just in the base game itself. And just cards. I really liked cards. I think Dominion and Legendary were both card games that I was very into when I first got into the hobby. So more and more card games are always a thing that piques my interest. And Arkham Horror, the first time, I don't know, I didn't buy past the first box, and I got rid of it. The second time I bought it, I got into it because the solo board gaming community on Instagram was probably the most instrumental at getting me into board gaming community in the world, because as a solo gamer, part of it wasn't necessarily by choice, because it was the first hobby or first thing that I had that I found entirely on my own, was not influenced by anyone else, and family and friends were not into board gaming. It was kind of like, where the heck did I find this thing? So solo board gaming was just what I had to do if I wanted to play board games. And as I was posting things on my personal Instagram, I started to realize I am the only one that probably enjoys this stuff, so it's also all I'm posting about in my life. So maybe I should just do something separate so I don't bug people. So hence became Boardgaymergirl. And I posted board games in general, but Arkham Horror, the card game, was the first one that I got into, and then I got into like a little chat group of people that were talking separately, but we all kind of knew we existed. And we got into one little group, and one of the things we did was we'd go through an entire campaign, playing it solo but together, in the sense that we would pick different investigators that we are going to play this campaign through. So let's say we're playing the Dunwich campaign, which is the first expansion box from the Arkham Horror living card game. So what we'd do is we'd all decide, like, we'd make our own decks. The regular rules apply, where you have to use all 0 experience cards, and depending on the type of investigator you have, which aspects you kind of are allowed to use. Everyone each week, like through the business week, so Monday through Friday, we'd say, this week we're going to play scenario 1. And scenario 1 was played. We wouldn't talk about it, But on the weekend, that was like your point. You can play any day, Monday through Friday, but you couldn't talk about it in the group until the weekend. Once the weekend hit, then we all talked about which investigators we played as, what happened, what experience we got, did anyone die, did you beat the monster, so that we all got to communally talk about our experience. And it was so neat and so unique and kind of just a building block experience for me to see that playing board games solo doesn't necessarily come across as... I feel like people think of solo gamers as literally you live in a cave by yourself. How can that be fun? Like you're playing alone. But over the years, I've realized that because we're playing solo and we're playing alone, and we also enjoy the games we're playing so much, that the solo community is almost a bigger deal than playing board games multiplayer. I feel like it's so much more of an experience, so much more joy than people really realize. And people that don't play solo board games just don't get kind of how it can be just that exciting, maybe. I don't know. That's just like my mind wandering. But Arkham Horror, the card game, was just foundational in that sense. And given this community, it gave it so much more longevity to me that I bought a whole bunch of campaigns. I even bought like the April Fool's dog expansion, the dog and cat one that is just, it's funny. And I liked the narration and story of that living card game the most. But I found it the most difficult to prep for a game because you're setting up a set of cards like you would a regular board game. Then you're going to construct your deck. And then when you go play and you're playing through a campaign, you just play it that one time, regardless of what happens, that you do all this setup and then you're done. And then you put it away and you have to set up again for the next one. And you set up your deck based on different cards you might want to add or take away based on that thing. But you don't get to reconstruct your deck outside of the normal rules of the campaign. Unlike things like Marvel Champions. Well, I think Marvel Champions is more relaxed with your deck construction rules. And I think Lord of the Rings, the card game, is the least restrictive with changing your deck between scenarios. It's not really campaign-based in a sense, the way that release happens. But for Arkham Horror, it just felt like the most restrictive in that sense. And the setup and teardown between each thing just felt like way more work than the actual experience would be when you're doing it. Plus, you also have the theming, which this theming was the least interesting to me. I'm not into scary stuff or Cthulhu. I do not like H.P. Lovecraft for reasons that may or may not be obvious for some. And it just was the least exciting for me in the sense when I'm comparing it to the other two living card games amongst the Holy Trinity. So that game got called and did not return to my collection. However, I will say that when I went to Canada Plays and I went to the Fantasy Flight booth and I got to see the Arkham Horror living card game second new edition the thing is they've officially ended their previous iteration of Arkham Horror, the living card game. And the idea behind this is that it's a second life to the card game. So it's not a reprint of the earlier old Arkham Horror, the card game. This is a second beginning of Arkham Horror, the living card game. So you have completely new investigators, so not the same as the original core game, and you have completely different scenarios. And with all of that, I am super curious about the card game again. And while, again, I'm sure it's got similar things going on that had me kind of call the game at first, that thing about how it built my community and is foundational to my experience and growth in the hobby just makes it something that it almost feels like I said, I think there were 3 times for this particular game that I went back and forth with. And at one time I had bought all the buy the same tokens thing. It was probably the most blinged out of my living card games for the longest time. And I called it all, which was like, it's sad, but trying to share my time with all 3 evenly started to make me feel guilty. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I can't deal with the guilt. But yeah, this new reprinting just looks really neat. And at some point, I will have to look into it and see if you guys have had any experience with the new core Arkham Horror core box. Let me know in the comments below, and if you have any thoughts in comparisons with the older version and the new version. But now for my most heartbreaking game that I got in my collection and I called and very much regret. And this one's kind of a weirder, different story than the 4 I've said before. This one is regularly put as a #1 solo board game of all time in a lot of people's lists. And the theme is just perfect. Like, I love everything about it. And this game is Spirit Island. And Spirit Island, there's just so many good things about it. So first, I'm gonna say that the board gaming industry and board game designers, for some reason, continually want to do and remake history and colonialist themes, which, I don't know, when you're in a creative hobby and you can't think of anything you could do better than colonialism, it started to get annoying at certain points where I'm like, I could like these games, but I feel a little icky. And that is a personal opinion of mine. Obviously, everyone has their own reasons or things that they like. Like, obviously there's a whole subsection of just war gamers and war games with historical themes and such, right? But just for me personally, it just does, like, I'm just thinking you could be a little bit more creative in board games sometimes. But I think the bigger thing was that how are there so many colonial games coming out at this point? I can't remember when it was that Spirit Island came out, but it was just like a breath of fresh air, because for once someone made a game where it's almost anti-colonialism. So it's still like some fantasy made-up world where you have the fictional native peoples of this land, and they are called the Dahan. And there are these invaders that are coming to your land and kind of trying to take it over and industrialize the area. And what you'll be doing is you'll be playing as different spirits, and these spirits have different powers and decks to help influence pushing the colonizers out of the land to a certain point, and you win the game. The spirits aren't necessarily fighting back themselves. In a way, they're moving things around on the board, they're helping the Dahan, and you're doing different things. And there's a ton of spirits now, so I can't remember how many came in the base box itself, but they have ranging complexities with different abilities. But every spirit comes with a set of cards, and as you go through the game, you can buy more cards to put better things in your deck that you can use over time. And it's just, I guess it's similar to almost like living card games that I liked as well. But because the theme is just something that I appreciate so much and I didn't find out there as much, it was just refreshing and kind of like a breath of fresh air. But from a design and mechanism standpoint as well, the theme soaked into even the components. And I love when games do this. The Dahan, all their pieces were wooden. It's not like industrialized or anything like that. It's all like wooden pieces taken from the earth. But all of the invaders' pieces were plastic. So it was like all industrialized kind of pieces. And just that symbolism itself, I really liked and was interesting to me. But also when it came to the pieces that would be placed on the board for Dahan and for the invaders, the way that they were made also helped you understand how much HP or health each of these different components had. So for the Dahan, they'd be like little mushroom caps. And depending on if you hit them for one, you would flip them over and have the bottom of their mushroom stem show up, and that would show that they'd have 1 health left. And then obviously if they had 2 health taken off, then the component is taken off of the board. Invaders pieces, there were 3 different types of pieces. So there was a singular invader, which obviously was only 1 health point. So if you kicked it right off the board. And then there were towns, and these towns, so it would have a little standee thing, and you'd have 2 little sprouting buildings that would come out from that little standee thing. And if you hit it for 1, you'd turn it on its side, so then you'd see that there's only 1 piece of that building still up. So it would show you, like visually, that that only has 1 health point left. Then obviously if you got rid of it, you got rid of it with 2 health points. And then there were cities, and cities were 3 health points, and like the town buildings, they would have 3 little stacks of buildings. The standee would be created so that on one side, so let's just say the left and the right side, so on the left side of this component, there would be 1 building, and on the right side of that component, you would have 2 buildings. So depending on how much damage that city token would take, you would lay it on the according side so that what is most forward or top would be the amount of health that it would have. So if you hit it for 2 points, you would lay the 2 points down and show that there's only 1 building showing on the top of that component. If you hit it for 1, then you could lay it down and show that there's only 2 health points left for that component. And that kind of like really detailed stuff really is something that I like, especially that helps you work through the game, as it just makes it more easy, and the design itself just feels like they have empathy for the gamer in how their play experience is, down to the components that can make it just an easier, smoother experience in that sense. So obviously, all these things are fantastic for Spirit Island. I should have enjoyed this game, and like I said, this is the #1 solo board game of all time on so many different lists, and even on the BGG list, it's been #1 for a long time, over and over again. I don't know if it's currently #1, but I digress. So in the game, you are trying to kind of build up fear so that it makes the game easier for you to defeat. And the fear obviously is sparking fear into the invaders. And the more fear that you run through over a period of time of the game, the easier the end game is for you. Because at the beginning of the game, your requirement for winning is that you get rid of every single invader piece on the board. And that is so difficult. But as you generate more fear, you have less difficulty at trying to win the objective. That is one way to win, and there are tons of ways to lose, almost like a pandemic kind of game. There's just everything wrong that could go wrong does go wrong. And it's an interesting puzzle, but that end game for me, at some point, it felt like I had all this buildup and all this expectation, and it would not feel exciting enough for me when I got to the end game. It's like, yeah, I won, and that's it. Now, talking about this right now actually makes me curious. As I mentioned, the change in how I view playing games because of Nusfjord, where that ceiling of, oh, I'm just repeating the same process over again and I'm not feeling fulfilled, and realizing that I enjoy the journey of a game a lot more than I used to, that maybe Spirit Island could have a second chance, and I've wanted it to for so long, but this is probably the most heartbreaking, as it is like, It's like a relationship that you really want it to work, but at some point you and the other person just have to come to terms with realizing that we're just not meant to be. You have mutual respect for each other and you love each other dearly, but you're like this. You don't work. And yeah, that's been me in Spirit Island. I would always also recommend this game for people. I'd say my experience, but if you can get your hands on this game and at least try it once, it's just so great. And I mean, the other good news that's recent is Greater Than Games were the company that created Spirit Island, and they've supported it, and they had so many expansions for the game with so many different spirits that you can use. And unfortunately, they were one of the publishing companies that were affected by tariffs last year. So I think that was just like a really hard blow. All of the publishers and people affected by the tariffs was obviously a difficult time. But in recent, more happy news, I saw recently that the original CEOs of Greater Than Games have been reinstated and the publisher is now back. So who knows what that means for Spirit Island. But I am done with this video. As always, these always feel very long, but maybe it's just because I'm by myself in my basement and it's cold and I'm talking to a camera like you're a person. This has been an interesting video for me. It's definitely taken me through more of how an emotional journey just board gaming in general can be, and how personal just board gaming, board game collecting, the different history and stories you can have from your experience of playing a game, of buying a game, of calling a game. And yeah, I mean, that's just board games, I think, for me, and I think for all of us. So my question to you at the end of this video is, what board games have you called that you've regretted? And leave those stories in the comments. I find it so interesting to see those journeys and talk about that kind of stuff, and I definitely want to hear more about it. But for now, it is late, I am cold, I need to eat, and nobody needs to know all this information that I'm telling you, so I'll just say goodbye!